There's something different about Halloween in Ireland. The old timers will tell you it's the night when the veil between our world and the next grows as thin as the mist over a bog. When I was younger, I thought these were just stories, the kind of thing you'd hear in the pub after a few pints, or stories told to spook the tourists. I don't think that anymore. What I'm about to share with you are three accounts from people across Ireland, real people with real experiences, the kind of things you don't hear on the news because they can't be explained, in a rational way anyway. If this is the kind of thing you enjoy, remember to like and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I'm going to tell you why I left Mayo and why I'll never come back. This happened about 2 years ago on Halloween. I was 23 at the time, living in a tiny village just outside Castlebar. Population maybe about 300 people on a good day. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where your business is everyone else's business, and where nothing really ever changes. I loved it there, or I did until that night. Halloween here is still celebrated the old way, not like in the cities with the imported American customs, trick-or-treating, and plastic decorations. Nah, we do it properly. The whole village gathers in the hill above the houses. We build a massive bonfire, a Samhain fire, the old folks call it. It's supposed to guide the dead, light their way back to the other side after their night of wandering among the living. They've been doing it for as long as anyone can remember. Longer, probably. There are stories that the Celts used to light fires on this exact hill thousands of years ago. That it's a sacred spot, a thin place where the barrier between worlds is already weak. But we didn't think about that stuff. Not really. For us, it's just tradition, an excuse to gather, drink, tell stories, and let the kids run wild. I went up to the bonfire that night with my boyfriend Killian and a few friends. Killian was 25 and he worked construction in Castlebar. Good looking, wee bit of a messer and always joking around. We'd been together about 8 months and I was mad about him. The fire was already massive when we arrived around 9 o'clock. They'd been building it all day, stacking pallets and old furniture and branches. When they lit it at sunset, the flames went 20 feet in the air. You could already feel the heat on your face from 50 yards away, sparks rising up into the dark sky like reversed stars. There must have been 100 people there, families with small children, teenagers passing around cans, old folks sitting on folding chairs, close to the heat. Someone had brought a guitar. Mrs. O'Malley, who lives in a cottage at the edge of the village, had made barnback and was handing out slices to anyone who wanted them. It felt safe, warm, community. We'd been there for an hour, drinking and messing, when someone started telling stories of the banshee, trying to spook the younger kids. You know the tales. The wailing woman who appears before a death, washing blood-stained clothes in a stream. How you can tell which family she's coming for by the pitch of her cry. The kids were eating it up, huddling together with delicious terror. But Killian, being Killian, decided to mock it. He stood up, beer in hand, and shouted into the darkness beyond the fire. "If there's any ghosts out there, show yourselves. I'm not afraid of dead people. Come on then, let's have a look at you." Everyone laughed, and his mates cheered him on. But I noticed the older folks around the fire had gone quiet. Really quiet. And they were staring at Killian with these expressions that I couldn't quite read. Not anger exactly. More like concern. Or maybe even dread. Mrs. O'Malley, who was sitting closest to us, grabbed Killian's arm. She was about 70, a tiny woman, but her grip was iron. "Sit down." Sit down, shut your mouth. Killian tried to laugh it off. Miss O'Malley, I'm only having a laugh. You never challenge him. Especially not tonight. Especially not here. You never invite them in. Do you understand? Killian still pulled his arm free, smiling. It's 2022. There's no such thing as ghosts. The fire popped in, loudly, and a shower of sparks exploded upwards. Everyone jumped, and the sudden quiet that followed. We all heard it. A scream. Not a playful scream. Not someone messing around in the dark. This was raw, terrified. A shriek that cut through the night like a blade, making every hair in my body stand up. It came from somewhere down the hill, beyond the reach of the fire's light. Everyone froze. The guitar stopped as well. The kids stopped running, and 100 people held their breath, listening. The scream came again. Closer this time. It sounded like a woman somehow, but wrong. The pitch was too high. It lasted too long, impossibly long. There was no break for a breath of air. It rose and fell in waves that made my teeth ache and my stomach turn. Then stopped. The silence after was somehow worse than that sound. Nobody moved or spoke, just a fire cracking, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Killian had gone white as a sheet. The grin finally wiped off his face. But trying to save face in front of his friends, or maybe just unable to back down once he started, grabbed the torch from his jacket pocket. I'll go check on whoever that is. They might be hurt. I grabbed his jacket. Killian, don't go. But he's already pulling away from me, switching on the torch. Someone might need help. Aoife, I'll just take a quick look. 3 of his mates stood up to go with him. Donald, Shimmy and Finn, all lads from a village, all full of drink and bravado. Mrs. O'Malley was saying something in Irish over and over, but they weren't listening. I watched them walk away from the fire, their torch beam pointing as they moved, heading towards the crest of the hill, toward the darkness, towards wherever that scream came from. They disappeared over the slope, heading down the old stone circle. Most tourists don't know about that stone circle. It's not on any maps or marked with heritage signs. It's just 5 standing stones in a rough circle in a field below the bonfire hill. Local historians say it's Bronze Age, possibly Iron Age. Some say it was used for the Samhain rituals thousands of years ago, for offerings to the dead, for sacrifices. The farmers don't plough that field. Cattle don't graze there. Nothing grows in the centre of the stones except dead grass and nettles. We waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20. The bonfire kept burning, but the party atmosphere was dead. People were murmuring between themselves. Some of the families started packing up their kids and heading back down toward the village. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold on to my cider can. Then we saw the torch beams coming back over the hill, but only 2 of them. I ran towards them, meeting them halfway. It was Shimmy and Finn, both of them out of breath, faces pale in the firelight. Their eyes were wild. Where's Killian? And where's Donal? They couldn't speak at first. Just stood there gasping, looking back over their shoulders, as if something was following them. Finally, Shimmy found his voice. We found her. The woman, the one who was screaming. Is she okay? Where is she? She was just standing in the stone circle. Other people were gathering around us to listen. In the centre, all dressed in white, long hair covering her face, just standing there, swaying. We called out there, Finn continued, his teeth chattering. Asked if she was alright, if she needed help. And she turned toward us. Shimmy closed his eyes. Her face. Jesus Christ, Eva, her face. What about her face? It was rotten, decomposed, like she'd been dead for weeks, months maybe. We could see bone, Her eyes were gone, just empty sockets, but she was looking at us, just looking right at us. Some of the people listening gasped. Mrs. O'Malley started praying. Donald screamed, turned and ran, just bolted into the darkness. Away from the stones, away from us. We tried to grab him, but he was too fast. And Killian? Shimmy looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the terror in his eyes. The woman opened her mouth. The same scream we heard before came out, but up close it was unbearable, like metal scraping on metal, like something being tortured. We had to cover our ears. It hurt so bad. Then she started walking towards us, fun at it. But not walking, gliding. Her feet didn't touch the ground, and she was fast, impossibly fast. We ran, all of us ran. But Killian went the wrong way, toward the bog, not toward the bonfire. We shouted for him to follow us, but he didn't turn back. Last we saw, he was sprinting towards the tree line, and she was following him, gliding after him, herding him under the bog. I felt something cold set on my stomach. We have to find him. No, Mrs. O'Malley said, stepping forward. No one else goes out there tonight. You can call the guards and let them search. But none of you go into the dark, not tonight. Someone calls the guards, and they arrived 20 minutes later. They took statements, grabbed their torches and high-vis vests, and headed down towards the stone circle. They searched all night, but they found nothing. At dawn, they expanded the search, brought in dogs, volunteers from the village, even the mountain rescue. For 3 days, we combed every inch of the fields, the bog, and the trees. On the second day, they found Killian's jacket near the bog. It was torn to shreds and covered in mud. His phone was in the pocket, with the screen smashed. When they got it working, the last thing on it was a text they started to send to me, but he never finished. Something's following me. Help it's not. But that was it. There was nothing else. They never found Killian. On the fourth day, Donald turned up. He was walking along the main road under the village at 6 in the morning, barefoot, no clothes. A passing farmer picked him up and brought him to the guard station. He was completely incoherent, just stared at a wall, rocking back and forth. They took him to the hospital and kept him under observation. When he finally spoke, another 2 days later, all he would say was that he heard his mother calling him from the bog, asking him to come home, begging him to help her. His mother had been dead for 5 years. Donald never got better. He's in a psychiatric facility now. I visited him once before I moved away. He didn't recognise me. He just sat in the chair by the window, humming to himself. The nurses say he's harmless. He's just lost somewhere in his mind. Somewhere that he can't come back from. I moved to Dublin 2 weeks after the search was called off. I couldn't stay anymore. I couldn't look at that hill, the bonfire site, or the stone circles. Couldn't sleep without seeing Killian's face or hearing that scream. But the worst part? About a month after I moved, I started getting texts from Killian's number. Just one word, cold. Sometimes at 2 in the morning, sometimes at midday. Always the same word. I blocked the number, changed my phone, but somehow they still come through. Not often, maybe once every few months. Always when I'm alone. Always after dark. Cold. His phone was sealed in the evidence bag at the guard station 2 years ago. It's been disconnected. The service cancelled. The guards confirmed this. They showed me the evidence log. But I got another text last week. Just 4 letters in the darkness. Cold. I'm a priest. Or I was. I left the priesthood 6 months ago, after 32 years of service. This is the first time I've told anyone the real reason why. My name is Eamon O'Sullivan. I served as a parish priest in rural Cork for most of my career. Small parishes, a kind where you knew every parishioner by name, and where the church is the heart of community. I love my work, the people, and I felt genuinely called to serve. But I don't believe that anymore. Not after what happened October 31st, 2021. The parish I was serving that year is a tiny place called Ballina. About 40 families scattered across miles of farmland and bog. The church itself, built in the 1840s, grey stone, slate roof, small cemetery attached. Peaceful, beautiful, in that stark way rural Ireland churches are. I lived in the parochial house next door. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a sitting room. It was comfortable enough, quiet. I'd been there 3 years, and I'd grown to love the silence and the isolation. Time to think, pray, and read. October fell on a Sunday that year. I'd said the morning mass, done my usual rounds, and returned home at around 4 in the afternoon. It was already getting dark, that early autumn darkness that comes fast, heavy clouds, and rain threatening. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the fire reading. The forecast said there'd be a storm that night. The wind was already picking up, rattling the windows, but I was used to it. The house had weathered storms for nearly 2 centuries. At around 7 o'clock, I got a call from Mrs. Conley. She'd asked if I remembered to set a place for the dead. I thought she was joking. Father, it's Samhain. You need to set a place at your table, a plate of food, and a cup of milk for any souls that may pass through tonight. Mrs. Conley, you know the church doesn't endorse those old. Father Eamon, I lived in this parish for 76 years. My mother lived here before me, and her mother before her. This is the way. You don't have to believe. You just do it. Please. Weirdly, something in her voice made me agree. The humour, I thought. Sure, what harm could it do? After we hung up, I set a plate on my dining table, put some bread and butter on it, and poured a cup of milk. I did feel slightly stupid for doing it though, if I'm honest. But there was something almost comforting about it too. A connection to the old ways, to the people who'd lived here centuries before the church came. I went to bed around 10. The storm was in full force by then. Wind howling around the house, rain hammering the windows. The electricity flickered a few times, but it stayed on. I read for a bit, said my prayers, and turned off the lights. I was almost asleep when I heard it. A knock at the front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Clear enough to hear over the storm. I checked my clock. It was 11:48. My first thought was that someone needed me. An emergency. Maybe a death in the parish, and last rites were needed. It did happen occasionally. I got dressed quickly and headed downstairs. The knock came again and I reached the door. Same rhythm and 3 beats. I turned on the front light and opened the door. There was no one there. Just the empty yard, rain sheeting down, wind bending the trees beyond the church. My car sitting where I parked it. It was just the church itself, dark and silent. Hello? Is someone there? But I never received an answer. I stood there for a moment, thinking maybe some teenagers were just messing about. Halloween pranks. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy and oppressive. It was like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, but 10 times worse. I closed the door and locked it, went back upstairs, convinced myself it was nothing. The wind, or a branch hitting the door maybe. Or I could have even imagined it, so I was half asleep. I got back into bed, but I couldn't sleep. The storm seemed to get worse now. The whole house was creaking and groaning, and I had this feeling, this certainty, that I wasn't alone. The clock on my bedside table clicked to midnight. Then the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent, and not from the front door. From downstairs, from inside the house, from the sitting room. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. That was impossible. I locked the front door. There were no other entrances to the house. The windows were all closed. The knocking continued. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. Over and over. I should have stayed in my room. Should have called the guards. But I was a priest. It was my job to face things, not hide from them. And some part of me needed to know what was down there. I went to the landing and looked down the stairs to the door of the sitting room, and it was closed, which I of course left open. I was certain I left it open. The knocking stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps, slow and heavy, moving through the sitting room, the old floorboards creaking under the weight. Then a voice called out, "Father!" It was a man's voice, but somehow wrong, like it was being produced by something that didn't quite understand how human voices behaved. "Father, I'm cold." I should have run. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out of the house, but I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stand there on the landing, staring at the closed door. "Father, I'm hungry." The door handle turned. The door swung open, and I saw into the sitting room. There was a man sitting at my dining table, in the chair I placed the offering on. The plate of bread was in front of him, untouched, a cup of milk beside it. He was impossibly tall. Even sitting, he seemed to fill the whole room. He was wearing old clothes, like from the last century. A black suit with a white shirt. His back was to me, his head bowed, and shoulders hunched. "Thank you for the offering, Father, but it's not enough." "Who are you?" He stood up, and he kept standing up, unfolding like something that had been compressed into too small a space. His head nearly touched the ceiling, and when he turned around, I saw his face. Only, it was my face. Not similar to mine. Not looking like a relative, but my exact face. Only the eyes wrong. They were ancient. Older than the church, older than the village, older than anything I could comprehend. They were looking at me with something that might have been hunger or recognition. "I've been waiting a long time, Eamon," he said in my voice. "Did you think the old contract was broken? Did you think the church walls would protect you?" "I don't understand," I replied. "This land remembers. The people who worshipped here before your God came, they made promises, offerings, blood and bone and service. Your church built on these promises, Father, built on the ground that was already consecrated to something else." He took a step towards the stairs, closer to me. "Every generation, one of you feeds the hunger, keeps the bargain. That's why you're here, Eamon. That's why you were called to this parish, because it's your turn." I ran, turned and ran back to my bedroom, slamming the door, pushing the dresser against it. I could hear him on the stairs, those impossibly heavy footsteps. He stopped right outside my door. "You can't hide from what you are. You can't hide from what we're owed." The door handle rattled. I grabbed my phone and called Miss Connolly. She answered on the first ring. "Father, are you alright? There's something in my house. Something..." Did you set the offering? Yes, but did you invite it in? I gave pause and thought back. The knock at the front door, me opening it and looking out into the empty yard. Did you say anything, Father? Did you call out? I said hello. I asked who was there. Silence came on the other end of the phone. Well then, Father, you welcomed it in. You gave it permission to cross the threshold. The door started to shake. Something was pressing against it from the other side and pushing. The dresser scraped across the floor. What did I do? I was crying the actual tears now. Miss Connolly, please, what did I do? Listen to me carefully, she said. Listen to the words I'm going to say, and you must repeat them exactly. Do you understand? The door now opening inch by inch. She began to speak them in Irish, Old Irish, the kind you'd hear in ancient prayers and texts from before Christianity came to Ireland. I repeated the words, not knowing what they meant, just trusting that she knew what she was doing. The door stopped moving. The presence on the other side went still. Mrs. Connolly kept speaking, and I kept repeating. My voice grew stronger. The words had power. I could feel it, even if I didn't understand. Then suddenly, the pressure was gone. The house quiet, except for the storm. I waited 5 or 10 minutes before I dared move the dresser and fully open the door. The landing was empty. Downstairs, the sitting room door stood open. I forced myself to look inside, but the table was now empty. The plate and cup both gone. In the middle of the floor was a wet patch, as if someone had tracked in water. The footprints led from the table to the front door, which stood wide open, swinging in the wind. I called the guards and told them I had a break-in. They came, took a report, and checked the house. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprint, just a wet footprint that they couldn't explain. Mrs. Connolly came by in the morning, looked at me carefully, and said, "You should leave this parish, Father. You're not meant to be here. The land knows you now, and it will come back." I tried to stay, tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare. But every night after that, at midnight, I'd hear the footsteps and feel the presence, see my own face looking back at me from darkened windows. I requested a transfer. The bishop asked why, but I couldn't tell him the truth. I made up something about needing a change due to burnout. He approved it, but I knew it wouldn't matter, because wherever I went, the footsteps then followed. I left the priesthood 6 months ago, moved to Dublin, live in a flat with other people around. I'm never alone at midnight, never alone in the dark. But of course, it was October 31st again, and at midnight, I hear 3 knocks on my bedroom door. "Father," said a voice from the other side, "I'm still cold. I'm leaving Ireland tomorrow, and I don't know where I'll go. But I need to get away from this land, this old remembering land. Though part of me knows that the distance won't matter. The bargain was made long ago before any of the lands. I'm a mechanic. I work with things I can see, touch, and fix with my hands. It's quite logical, really. That's my world, or it was, until October 31st, 2018. I was 19 then, driving home from Galway, after a night out with my mates. We'd been watching a band and had a few pints after. Nothing mental, just a normal Thursday night that happened to fall on Halloween. I was the driver, which meant I had to be stone cold sober, which is the most important part, because what I'm about to tell you, I saw with completely clear eyes. I left the pub car park just after midnight, checked my phone for the time, because I was worried about getting home before my dad locked the door. He's kinda old school like that. He locks it at 12:30 on the dot, and it doesn't matter if you're still out. The back road to my village cuts through some of the most isolated countryside. I've driven it hundreds of times. It's just stone walls on either side, barely wide enough for two cars to pass. On the occasion you could see sheep wandering onto the tarmac. There's no street lights once you're 5 minutes outside the city. Just your headlights and the occasional reflective post marking a sharp bend. I had the radio on, Phantom FM, I think, some late night talk show, but the reception kept cutting out the further I got from the city, so I got pissed off of it and turned it off. I rolled down the window instead to let the cold air in to keep me awake. And that's when I smelt it. Peat smoke, thick and acrid, like someone was burning turf nearby. The smell took me straight back to my grand's house, sitting by her fire when I was a kid. This was strange though, because there were no houses for miles on this stretch of road. Even if there was, who'd have their fire going at midnight? Most people would be in bed, and the fire damping down for the night. I slowed down for a bit, trying to figure out where the smell was coming from. But the smoke seemed to be getting thicker, hanging low across the road. My headlights caught wisps of it, grey, white tendrils drifting across the tarmac. Then I saw the crossroads ahead. You have to understand, this crossroads is notorious locally. 3 roads meeting at odd angles, with an old stone marker in the centre. It's been there since before anyone can remember. It's lichen covered, probably medieval. My gran always says, you never stop there. On Samhain night, never. You keep your eyes forward and you drive through, no matter what you see or hear. She never explained why, just said it was the way of things, and there were reasons the old people had rules. But I slowed down anyway. God help me, I slowed down. There was a figure standing at the crossroads, standing right beside that stone marker, under where a street light would be, well, if there was one, but there wasn't. The thing is though, I could see him perfectly anyway, like he was somehow generating his own light, or the darkness around him was less dark. He was wearing old-fashioned clothes, like something from a photograph in the 1920s. Dark wool coat that went to his knees, a flat cap, and heavy boots that were caked in mud. His back was to me, and he was just standing there, completely still, facing down the road that leads to the old church. The one that's been closed since the 60s because the ground's too unstable. It was built on bogland, and the graves started sinking and the headstones tilting. They stopped burying people there about 50 years ago. I stopped the car completely, put it in neutral, and the handbrake on. I don't know why. Every instinct was screaming at me to drive on, do not look, to remember what my gran had said. But my foot was on the brake, and I was staring at this man who hadn't moved, or hadn't even turned to acknowledge my car. The peat smoke smell was overwhelming now. It was making my eyes water, and I noticed something else. There was no sound, no wind, no distant sheep, no rustling in the hedgerows, just absolute, total silence, like the whole world holding its breath. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, although it felt like an hour. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles gone white. I was telling myself to drive, just drive, put your foot down and get out of here. But that's when he turned around. I really need to emphasise this. I thought about this moment every single day for the last 6 years. I've been trying to rationalise it, explain it away, tell myself I was tired or the light was just playing tricks. But I know what I saw. His face wasn't right. I can't describe it exactly. Not because it was horrific or monstrous, because it wasn't finished. Like someone started to draw a face and gave up halfway through. Features that were there and not there at the same time. I could see a nose, but it was wrong. Eyes, but they were too far apart. A mouth that seemed to be in the wrong position altogether. And his eyes, they were completely black. Not just the pupils, the entire eye. black as bog water, black as the spaces between the stars, and they were looking directly at me, through their windscreen, and right through me. He raised one arm slowly, deliberately, and pointed down towards the old church. His mouth moved, opening and closing, like he was speaking, but I heard nothing over the ringing that had started in my ears, high-pitched and painful, like tinnitus, but worse. The smell of peat making me gag now, so bad I could taste it in the back of my throat. He took a step towards the car. That broke the spell. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, released the handbrake, and the car lurched forward. I shot right through the crossroads, not caring if anything was coming from the other direction, not caring about anything except just escaping. In my rear view, I saw him standing there, arm outstretched, getting smaller as I sped away. And then the smoke rolled in, and he was gone. I didn't slow down until I hit the village, pulled up my lane, killed the engine, and just sat there shaking. My shirt was soaked through with sweat despite the cold. I checked my phone. It was 20 to 1. The whole thing had taken maybe 15 minutes. I didn't tell my parents when I got inside. Just said the traffic was bad and went straight to sleep. Well, went to bed anyway, because of course I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, that peat smoke smell still in my nose, seeing those black eyes every time I closed mine. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my dad reading a paper at the kitchen table. He looked up at me and said, "Did you hear about Seamus?" I hadn't. "Dropped dead last night. Heart attack. He was walking home from the pub just after midnight. They found him this morning on the side of the road." I felt my stomach drop. "Where?" I asked, though I already knew. "Out near the crossroads. The one by the old church. Weird place they collapse in the middle of nowhere." I looked up Seamus' obituary that afternoon. 68 years old, survived by 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. The funeral would be held at the new church in the village. But it was the family history that made my blood chill. Seamus had lived in the old cottage near the crossroads back in the 1980s. That cottage had burned down in a turf fire. He'd been the only survivor. His wife and young son had died in a blaze. After that, he'd moved into the village. He remarried eventually, but according to the obituary, he never spoke about the fire, never visited the ruins of the cottage, and he told his daughters never to stop at the crossroads after dark, especially on Samhain night. I went to his removal 2 days later, paid my respects, though I barely knew him. His daughter thanked me for coming, then asked if I'd driven past the crossroads the night he died. When I said yes, she went pale. "Did you see anything?" she asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. But she nodded anyway, like my silence was enough. "He saw something there too. The night of the fire. He never said what, but it changed him. Made him careful, superstitious. We thought, but maybe he knew better than we did. I don't drive that road anymore after dark. If I have to, I'll go 2 hours out of my way just to avoid it. And I never stop at the crossroads on Halloween, because sometimes the old rules exist for a reason, and sometimes the dead don't want to be forgotten."